welcome to Resilient Retail. I am so glad you're here. You and I have had already so much fun before we even hit record, so I know this conversation is going to be good. To just start out, I know that 54 Thrones has a really rich and personal backstory, especially for you. You launched in 2016, but can you take us back, even before launch and just kind of walk us through your journey to entrepreneurship and your journey to becoming 54 Thrones that is today?
Absolutely. So, like many people, I worked in corporate America. Before I, got into my career, I went back to school and got an MBA. I also got a master's in healthcare administration, and I started consulting. And so for 3 years, I would travel around Monday through Thursday consulting. I would fly to New Jersey. I had clients there. I had clients in Cleveland. And I did that to the point where one day I was like, you know what? These sky miles aren't really worth it. I'm not passionate about what I'm doing. I never was like the employee that was staying late and, trying to run the midnight oil. That was not me.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm out of here at 5 o'clock, and so I was like, you know what? I want more meaning in my life. And around that same time, I just became more and more interested in learning about my heritage, learning about where I came from. My father is Nigerian. My mother is American. But as a kid, we grew up with like the African beauty secret. So my grandmother is behind us. That's my dad's mom. And my dad grew up in Nigeria, and he immigrated to the States, but his family, his sisters stayed behind, and they would always find a way to send us little tubs of shea butter and cocoa butter and black soap. And so I grew up using these ingredients, like in small little Tupperware tubs, like nothing fancy, but I grew up with these like rich, natural ingredients. And so around that same time in 2015, I'm the kind of person that like, I couldn't do like a side hustle and have a full-time job. Like I have to get really uncomfortable if I'm going to like put 100% into it. And so I quit my job. I cashed out my Roth IRA, my 401k, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a big risk and make something happen. And so I did that. For the next year, I traveled. I traveled a lot in Africa. So I spent a lot of time in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Morocco. And as I was there, I was spending more time with my family there, but I also was drawn to the makers. So I was drawn to the women and men who were making shea butter in Ghana, argan oil in Morocco, jojoba and black seed oil in Egypt. And throughout my trips, I would just really, I would find who was making stuff, and I would ask like, hey, can I come? I want to learn. Like, I want to see. All of those like beauty rituals really, really interest me.
Yeah.
And in 2016, so a year later, I had the idea, and I was like, you know what? I want to start a brand. I was always into beauty, and I wanted it to be different because I wanted to focus on African beauty rituals, but I also wanted to work closely with the men and women who actually make the ingredients with their hands. Like, they're the ones who know these ingredients and these beauty rituals the best. They've used them for generations, and I wanted to work with them, and I wanted to create something in like an elevated way. And there's 54 countries in Africa. That's where our ingredients are sourced. So 54 countries, 54 thrones.
I love it.
That's where the name comes from.
I love it so much because these are things that like the beauty industry in America and every pretty much kind of white dominant country have taken and put into so many products that are not even marketed in the way the ingredients were originally intended for. Like you see shea butter and everything and jojoba oil and everything, but it's not really coming from the roots of the product. And it's not really honoring the traditions of the product, which I think that's what's so cool about your brand is that you're still honoring so much of the tradition, not just of your own, but of the products that are being made and the people who brought them to the world. And I think that's got to be, I'm guessing, and maybe you can speak to this personally, what is that like to kind of be able to support the community that is from your background and your native roots and actually really do it in a good way that is true to your origins?
Well, thank you. And every African country I go to, I feel like I'm at home. I feel so close. Even, I'm Nigerian, but when I go to, Ghana or Uganda and Kenya, like I feel home. Like I feel like this is where I'm from. And so being able to work with people who are there who do this as their job. Like they make shea butter as their job. This is what they're passionate about, or this is just what they do and what they know best. And so being able to partner with them closely and being able to, pay them fair wages, and direct
Yeah.
to them. So not going through another source and then to them, like being there, being on ground, meeting them. I call them on WhatsApp and we talk and, so it's like that close relationship to me is like the most important, the most special part of what we do, because I literally ask like, hey, what could I do as a brand, as a business person that could impact you the most, like impact your
Mhm.
cooperative the most? And in that same thread, I want to know, tell me the history of shea butter. Like, tell me how you've used it. Tell me what it's for. Tell me. And so I really get that intimate experience with every product that we make.
Yeah. And like talking with these makers that have been in the ingredients for so long and there's so much heritage behind it. And I feel like this is such a tricky question, but I'm sure you've learned so many life lessons from these people. What would you say is like the one thing that you continuously keep learning from them, or kind of the biggest lesson that opened your eyes to the world a little bit?
I would say that many of the women and men that I've met, community and family is a big thing. Like here in America, you might live somewhere for 5 years and don't even know your neighbor's name,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
like that's normal. Like in America,
Yeah.
like some places, some cities, some towns, it's like people are driving home and you see them and they try to hurry and pull into the garage so they don't have to
Yeah.
speak and have to have
Some
that
places it's like
interaction.
weird to know if you know your neighbor's
Right.
name.
Exactly. But, the different African countries that I've been to, it's like community. A lot of these beauty rituals were
Yeah.
built on community. Like in Morocco, there's the Moroccan hammam, which is like a bathhouse. And
Wow.
women would go there to be around their community and to like have that time to bond and talk. And that's encouraged. And so African beauty rituals, and I don't say African as a monolith. There's 54 countries. We just, we source from a lot of different countries, but in
Yeah.
general, African beauty rituals are about community. They're about sharing. They're about family. They're about the whole. And another like super important lesson that I love is that nothing is wasted. Like they will find a piece,
Mm,
whether it be from a plant, or a flower or a root or a butter, they will find a way to use it in multiple ways. And so nothing is wasted. I've visited some places where, in some far off villages where they don't have fridges. So what they make, they eat that day. Like they're not wasting things. They're not storing things
yeah.
away. And that might be because, their circumstance, but it also just inherently is zero waste. It's clean. They're not taking more than they need. And so those are like the most important like things that I've learned throughout this whole process.
I love these answers so much because my intention with the question was to prove that you are bringing stuff to the modern world that needs to be here. These lessons that, America is a great place to be, but not always for everybody. And those lessons seem like where consumers are kind of shifting towards wanting to be part of
Yeah.
communities and wanting to know where their stuff is being sourced from and wanting to do good things for the planet. And so you walked into my podcaster trap so well. Basically. I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted to hear. And it's amazing. And it's so heartwarming too to hear just like the way that all these things are coming together and creating a community, and that you're able to bring those ideas and lessons over to kind of the e-commerce world of North America, which is its own thing.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I have to mention 54 Thrones was named Oprah Magazine's award for Best Face Oil of 2020.
Yes.
Can you tell us, like, how did this happen and what has that experience been like?
Well, thank you, and it's been amazing. In short, there was a time where I have oily skin, and I wanted to create a product because I was in the process of training my skin and learning my skin, and so
Mhm.
I work with a farmer in Egypt, and he has a jojoba farm, and I visited with him. A wonderful man, and Jojoba oil is one of those oils that's really close to your sebum. I'm not going to go into a skincare lesson here, but I formulated this oil. And one thing about winning these awards or winning the O award is like in your mind, you think you're thinking of like Publishers Clearinghouse, like somebody's gonna knock on your door with a big like sign.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know that we won. I
Oh,
was just going through Instagram and I saw another young lady who has a brand and she posted like we won for like lip gloss or something. And I was like, oh, that's dope. And I was commenting. And then I was like, I wonder, did
wait a
we
second.
win something? And so I literally went to like oprahmagazine.com and I was scrolling and I was in my room with my sister. She was visiting me and it was early in the morning and I was just scrolling. And then I saw our name and I just lost it.
I
I'm like,
bet.
they don't call you, they don't email you. You have to find out on your own, like if you win.
Like
And so
Oprah didn't just show up at your door with a
no,
giant
I
check and a
was
sign.
waiting. Exactly. Like, I don't know. I thought I would get like a letter in the mail, a certificate,
Yeah.
but it's really like the best surprise ever. And so that was just amazing. We were like one of the smaller, like indie brands in our category, Black owned indie brands, bootstrap, Black owned indie brands that won. And like, it was us. And then like two spots over, it was like Fenty.
Oh,
And I just, yeah, it was amazing.
love that. That's so cool and such like a fun surprise to just be like casually scrolling Instagram and you're like, oh, cool, Oprah knows my brand. No, it's like no big deal at all.
It was crazy. I just like, yeah. I
Oh, I love that. I love that story so much. It's one of my favorites. And now there is this very unique thing about 54 Thrones, which is that you are vertically integrated, meaning you own the entire supply chain. Like what you're talking about, you know the farmer who's making the jojoba oil, you know the person who's churning the shea butter, you know all this. Why did you choose to go that route, even though it is a little bit more difficult? And what do you think the benefit is for your brand?
well, I you know, 54 Thrones was an idea. It was an idea that I sat on for close to a year while I was traveling. And the fact that I was traveling throughout Africa and going out of my way to meet these people and to travel. I have so many stories like on the smallest of rickety like planes trying to get to the villa. Like I put so much time, so much money into like going to these places. It was the only way that I could create a brand is working directly with the people who I had already met, working with the people who inspire me. Like I thought about my
Mhm.
aunt, my grandmother, who, they grew up using shea butter and they would make sure like it was important to her. And as a kid, I didn't understand why. I'm like, why was she sending us lotion all the way from Africa? I didn't
Yeah.
understand that, but she was doing that because that's part of our heritage. That's part of culture.
Mhm.
And I think so many Black Americans, and particularly, um, can't trace back that heritage. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to create something that worked very close directly, have that direct reach. That was important to me because like I said, my father's Nigerian, my mother's American. And so I know where I come from on my dad's side. My mom's side, we can only go back so far because of the slave trade, right? And so
Yeah.
I knew that if I was going to create something, it had to be direct. I didn't want to go through the middle. I wanted all of our ingredients to come from Africa. It is more difficult. It's been even more difficult because of COVID,
Oh,
and
I bet.
importing and shipping and just logistics. But I've started this way, and this is the way that I'm going to remain. This is the way that I want to remain, and so that's why we do it. It's the most meaningful way that I could have created a brand, and the people behind it is that is the brand. The people who make the ingredients, like that's the most important part.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear because it's a theme that keeps coming out of these conversations is the brands that can really stand out are the ones who have this resilient dedication to the consumers they're serving and the stories they're telling and the people that are impacted by the brand. And it's more than just the people who are buying, it's the suppliers, it's the people working for your brand, it's people who are then buying your products, and just hearing this absolute dedication to even though it's harder, even though it's not as easy and it's maybe not as scalable. We're going to do it this way because one, it's your passion. Two, it's what we need. It's what the world needs in a lot of brands. And three, it's what your consumers are really looking for is those stories,
Mhm.
those connections to the roots. I think that piece is really incredible. And now this brings into the conversation the retail side of things. So you guys, 54 Thrones is primarily a digitally native online brand, but you have been making this really big push to amplify the retail side. Well, why has retail been a focus for you? Why were you considering doing retail partnerships in the first place?
Well, I think for one, like I said, we're a 4-year-old brand, so we're not a new brand, but a lot of people had never heard of us until Black Lives Matter, and we had that platform to be amplified, and we were ready. And so, strategic retail partners, because that allows us to get in front of a customer that wouldn't be able to organically find us on their own.
Yeah.
And so, the Nordstrom customer is definitely our customer also. And so, although foot traffic is down these days, certain retailers have larger digital ad spends that can really target our customer and help convert potential customers. And so, choosing strategic retail partners to really get us in front of the end consumer to also help amplify brand awareness was my goal. I knew that I could go so far with my website, with my social media approach, with my marketing budget, but having that key retailer has really helped.
Yeah. And this just reminds me of like what Harley said in the very first episode, which was retail will never die. It will always evolve. And I think you prove this to be true because you're saying even with foot traffic down, even with the COVID pandemic, you still saw retail as a really big opportunity for the brand. Now, the thing with being vertically integrated, like we talked about, is that you do own every step of the process. You own your brand throughout, from ideation to supply to creating the product to then selling it. But then when you go into these major retailers like Nordstrom, you kind of become beholden to their regulations and their demands and the way they present your product. So, how did you go about choosing which partnerships to take, which ones not to take, and how to negotiate the terms so that you could ensure that the 54 Thrones brand that you've worked so hard to create stayed front and center even when it was in a Nordstrom store?
Well, I think as a brand owner, you have to be really intentional on your brand and what your brand DNA is, what your brand needs, who your customer is, where you see your brand. And I think that's with any business. I always looked at any business that I started, I would treat it like it was already 5 years ahead. So
Mm,
that might mean that you say no to a quick buck because you have a bigger picture in mind. And I also think, when you are talking to retailers, whether it be Nordstrom or whether it be whoever, make sure that you're able to communicate who your brand is. Like, who is 54 Thrones? Like, what is 54 Thrones? What's important to you? Because it's better to really communicate those things up front than to sign up with a partner that may not be the best fit. And then down the line, you're bucking heads because it never was a good relationship to begin with. And so
mm,
communication. Um, Sometimes I feel like if your brand, if you're in a unique niche or your brand, awareness or DNA is really strong, a retailer might be contacting you because of that. So because you're so different, we want you and we want you to be exactly who you are and
yeah.
come over and join us. And so I think sometimes that could be the case also. I guess that is kind of the ideal case. And I think 54 Thrones, we have a very clear, strong, I guess, brand identity. And so it's kind of like they're doing this, we're missing that. Let's bring them on board. And so I had a really good experience with working with the Nordstrom team and with coming on board and continuing to let 54 Thrones be 54 Thrones.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the focus on the long term. It's like, yes, we could probably have gotten into other retailers much quicker, but if they weren't the right partnerships and they weren't going to be able to present the brand in the way that we want the brand to be presented, then it's not quite worth just taking that kind of quick win on the shoulder because
Yeah.
it could be a lot harder in 2 years. And I think that's especially this year, like something retailers should really be thinking about is not acting in panic and like, yes, it's very hard. And yes, things are changing and it's crazy, but also, what is your 5 to 10 year plan? What is the
Hmm.
actual goal of the business? And making sure you're always putting that lens around the decisions you're making. Now, you mentioned this earlier, and it's something we have to talk about, spurred by kind of the spotlight of Black owned brands in the wake of Black Lives Matters protests, demanding justice for George Floyd and police reform and everything we've seen in this country. 54 Thrones has reported a sales jump to 300% this year. And beauty retailers are really coming out, and it seems like from the outside, they're trying to push hard to stock more Black owned brands, to take the step, to take the initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those initiatives you've seen coming out of major retailers like Nordstrom?
Well, yes, I think I'm glad that you acknowledged like this push. It didn't come out of thin air.
Yeah.
Because they're amazing Black owned brands have been around. We just didn't have that platform. And so, with the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, that trickled down to Black owned brands, and that trickled down to opening up more opportunities, letting our voices be heard in these arenas. The different grant. So to answer your question, I've seen a lot of grants come out. I've seen a lot of mentorship programs, and those are good. But we have to make sure that this isn't a trend.
Yeah.
It's more of a mind shift. It's not like, okay, we got to meet a quota. We got to bring 20 Black owned brands in. That's also good. Like that's also needed, but it has to be a mind shift. It has to be, you look at a Black owned brand as a brand and not just as a Black owned brand, because I think that's kind of been the issue where there's certain retailers and you could have 100 white owned brands, but it's like, oh, we have 5 Black owned brands. We can't bring on a 6. We have 5. And it's like, but you have 100, so
Yeah.
it has to be a mind shift completely.
Yeah.
Um, and so Nordstrom has a new inclusive beauty category, and that's where they're bringing on more Black and brown beauty brands, because, like I said, the talent is there, the brands are there, brilliant founders are there, the ideas. It's just a matter of opening the door and letting us in. And
Yeah.
I think there's been several amazing men and women who've created their own platforms. Like, okay, you're not going to let us in. We're going to create our own, e-commerce platform for Black owned brands. We're going to create our own stores. We're going to create our own opportunities. And we also have to keep doing that. That's really important as well.
Yeah. I am so glad you said that, because it's kind of what I was going after in that question is, this was spurred by a very devastating incident that happened in our country and that we're seeing happen again and again, is becoming more well known to everybody in the country. It's a little bit sad, and I'm sure for a brand like 54 Thrones and for you as an entrepreneurship is, yes, this is such an exciting time because people are paying attention to us. And yes, our sales have jumped 300%, but why did it have to take a public murder for this to happen? And so that brings in the conversation of, inclusivity and diversity has almost become this like trendy buzzword. And we've even seen some retailers kind of flop around with it, where they put out messages that are not authentic, that are not actually from the heart, that are not speaking to an actual mindset change. They're talking towards a trend. Do you think, from your personal experience, that the beauty industry is shifting to be more inclusive and more diverse, or do you think there's still a lot of work for us to go?
Well, there is still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But I also know that dollars speak. Um,
Mm.
Customers have, once they have, discovered these amazing Black owned brands, they're turning into repeat customers. And so what we know just from history, the mind shift is not going to happen immediately. But when you have a group of people who are saying, no, I want this Black owned brand, why don't you have it? That's going to force the people at the top who may not have made that mind shift, but they're still posting Black squares compulsory,
Yeah.
right? They're the ones that are going to say, okay, well, bring them on, because that's what the people want. And so dollars, money talks.
Hmm.
So I think before everyone might not have generally had this awakening moment where it's like, yeah, we need to support, Black owned brand, but the people the customers, the people who come to my website, the people who DM us, people who write us, people who go to Nordstrom and say, "Why are you sold out?" That's what's going to help the push as well, right? At the end of the day, these businesses are in business, right? And so the people who have finally discovered 54 Thrones and love us, they're the ones who are going to make the retailers do that shift. People like Aurora
Yeah.
James with 15% pledge. These kind of players are the ones that we also need to keep that shift and to make it more than just a trend. Make it more than just, oh, that thing that happened in 2020. Like, no, there's a change that happened. It's here.
Yeah. And it absolutely, for the listeners, cannot be a trend. It should not be a trend. It shouldn't be something that just happened in 2020. And my next question was going to be, what can we as consumers do to continue to build that equality in the beauty space? And from what you said, I'm hearing, purchase from Black-owned brands, but then keep purchasing from Black-owned brands because you're going to love them, because you guys have been working twice as hard as white-owned brands to make your space and to make your voice. And so it's going to be an incredible product. What else can consumers do to make sure that we keep building towards equality so we don't have to have these conversations in 10 years?
Well, I think the first step would just be, taking a look at yourself, taking a look at your thoughts, taking a look at your judgments when it comes to people, when it comes to how you treat someone at work, how you treat, someone in your extended family. Like, I think people have to first start with themselves and make those changes and first realize, that why are you thinking this way? And then really take a look internally to fix those things first. You can like a Black-owned brand, and you also can like shop a Black-owned brand and just be shopping because you like it. Not like shopping because I have to shop Black-owned. Like, I shop Black-owned, I bought that product, all right, I'm done. Like, no, like it can also be a part.
Yeah, definitely not just a hashtag to put on something.
Like, it can be part of like your lifestyle, part of your routine, part of your beauty ritual. And so I think really starting internally and like taking a look at yourself and what you can do to change so that we're not having, like you said, having to have these conversations 10 years from now. And so it really starts from the inside.
Yeah, I love that so much. I grew up in Texas. And so,
me too.
Oh, no way. What part of Texas?
I'm Austin.
Oh, I grew up in Dallas. So with being from Texas, this, Texas has its own kind of way of dealing with things. And I even have had so many internal conversations of realization of things I was raised on that I didn't even necessarily actively realize. But I think that is the most important thing is, yes, money talks, and where our money goes as consumers and who we DM and who we share is really important. But it has to start from an internal discussion with yourself on what system was I raised in and what beliefs have been kind of ingrained in me. And it may not be my fault, but it would be my fault if I continue to carry them on from this point on. So really looking at, what is going on in my head and how can I make even my own brain and my mental space more equal to the people around me, I think is a really important point. Now, I want to talk about, since we've talked about the award, we've talked about Black Lives Matter and your sales going up. Obviously, 54 Thrones then has gotten a lot of press coverage recently. How has that impacted the business, and how have you thought about media coverage, and how has it, changed the business or impacted the business at all?
Well, I'm thankful for every article, every editor who chooses to write about 54 Thrones and really share our products, share our brand, and even the bloggers and the TikTokers. And I'm thankful, and the YouTubers, like, it's all really been amazing, like, and heartfelt, like.
Yeah.
And the most obvious thing is that it's just helped spread awareness. A lot of people didn't know about 54 Thrones, right? And so now, because people who I didn't even imagine would be my customer are my customers now. And so that's really been the biggest impact. So just people who do read Birdie or Pop Sugar or Elle or whatever, and they see this brand and they click. And so it helps spread the word. It helps spread the awareness. And that's been the biggest amplifier, is these editors and showing up in these articles and people actually genuinely liking our products and our story.
Yeah, I love that. Now, we have to talk about the e-commerce side of your business because, this podcast is for brick and mortar retail owners. And for a lot of them, they're entering the e-commerce world for the first time ever. And you and I both know how complex and ridiculously insane and hard to learn the world of e-commerce is. You could spend 10 years in it and still not really know what you're doing. So on the e-commerce side of things, especially this year, what strategies and tactics have you guys put in place to keep building that successful online presence? Is there, if somebody is listening and is trying to find one or two things to put in their online store, do you have any specific tactics that you could talk to that have been really working for your brand?
Yes. Well, yes. And I'm still learning too.
Yeah.
I'm still learning this whole e-commerce game. Like I'm still in Facebook groups and on Twitter trying to learn new techniques.
Yeah.
But what has worked for us, because as we know, whether you're in retail or brick and mortar, or you have a service-based business or whatever, it is cheaper to keep the customers you have than to get new customers. The acquisition cost is it's cheaper and it's easier to nurture the ones who you already have. And so we love Klaviyo. We use them. We love, the email reminders that we have an automation going on. And so really, really utilizing the funnels with Klaviyo, that has helped. We also find that, of course, having the customary welcome, discount, most of our site visitors, they do utilize that. And we've seen a big return from that, as well as sending another welcome email, for those who didn't turn initially with that welcome, slight discount. So that's helped also. So Klaviyo is something that our team really, really loves, and we're learning more and more about it.
Yeah. One of my favorite tools of all time, email marketing has got to be the best way to bring back customers and create repeat customers. If you had to point to one single type of email that you would say, no matter what, if you're going to get your online store going, what kind of email does everybody need to have in their arsenal?
I would definitely say the people that put it in their cart and they don't buy. So the abandoned cart email, that, and if you have some sense of urgency behind it. We also, we have the back in stock email. So that one,
Nice.
Yeah, that one works too, because when things are sold out or back ordered, they can put in their email and then we alert them when it comes back in stock. And so when we do that, they come quickly. And then again, we put a sense of urgency behind that. Sometimes quantities are limited. So those two emails, and allowing the customer to put in their email address to be alerted, you got to have those in your store.
Yeah. I love that. And for the brick and mortar merchants who are listening, I just want to pull out kind of a piece of insight here. Really what we're talking about, especially these back in stock emails. Imagine somebody comes into your store and you have two pieces of something left and a customer really likes it and really wants to buy it. If you are telling them as a store associate, we only got two left and we didn't do any orders, they're probably going to buy it, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of experience, just taking it digitally of saying, hey, we ran out, you were interested in this, and now we have it back, come buy it. I'm always trying to translate kind of the online world.
That was a good translation. That was really good. I picture myself buying some shoes and oh, well, this is the only one we have left. I'm going to buy it.
I'm going to buy it right there. Can I give you some extra money to make sure nobody else gets them as well? Exactly. Kind of that urgency feel that happens so naturally in physical retail can still happen online. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Just two more questions before we wrap up. First one, and this is a big question. If you had one piece of advice for a new founder right now who's going through the shitstorm of 2020, what would it be?
Well, I would definitely say, trust your vision, trust yourself, trust your gut, but don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be so married to your idea to where you've tested it and you see it's not working and you just keep on going. So trust yourself, but don't be afraid to pivot. When we first launched, I was selling pure ingredients. So just like one ingredient per bottle. So maybe we just sold argan oil. Maybe we just saw shea butter. But then I realized that my customers, they wanted formulations. Like they wanted to have a more like holistic experience, like overall. And so that's when I started mixing oils. And that's when people started to like their ears like perked up when I did that. And so
Yeah.
if I would have been so married to just this, I would have never have gotten, there. And so definitely it's not, and don't be afraid of failure. Like failure is not something that's final. We fail
Yeah.
every day. We fail every day. Like something doesn't work. Okay. move, move on. A lot
Yeah.
of times, like we get so like tied into every little detail and we never even start. You never even launch because you're waiting for perfect. And most of the time, your customers are not even going to notice the small little errors and things that you
Yeah.
notice. So, don't get into analysis paralysis. Like start, pivot, be flexible. If it doesn't work, try something else. Like do that. Because otherwise you never start. And someone said, if you wait until it's perfect, you waited too long.
Oh, I love that so much. And I feel like I'm going to cut that 30 seconds of you talking and just make that my morning alarm because this is what I need every day. Like, Kristen, just get started. Doesn't need to be
And
perfect.
I had to learn that because I started other businesses, and sometimes you live in your business so
Yeah.
much to where you don't get anything done because you're obsessed with the minor details.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
And especially this year, like you just can't be resistant to change. You have to
Right.
be able to make those quick pivots. And now that you just brought me right into my next question, you are falling into all of my podcaster traps today. I love it. It's amazing. Final question of our interview. This show is called Resilient Retail. What does resilience mean to you on a personal level?
Um, Today is well, and I'm glad you asked that. I was driving home from work today to get home to do this podcast, and I just started thinking about everything that I've been through and everything that I've done. And I just thought because, I've had 54 Thrones for 4 years. And there was a time last year where, we were making our products and we didn't have a lot of traffic. And I just started to have that imposter syndrome. Like, are my products good? Like, do people even like them? I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I started to think that way for like a day. And then I was like, stop it, Christina. And I know
Yeah.
that if I would have quit last year, you wouldn't know me. You know what I mean? Like if I would have quit and been like, yeah, because the products that we carry, the products that people have grown to love are not new. I've had those, but nobody knew me. No one could find 54 Thrones. And so I had that quick moment that I had to shake off where I started to doubt what I was doing. Um, to doubt what I was creating. And so, as far as resiliency, I've always had a little voice inside my head. I've always been my own self motivator. I didn't need anyone to come motivate me. Like I was already internally motivated. But even the strongest people, the most confident people, the people that you think have it all together, they also have moments of doubt. And so it's good to always have a really, I don't know, you kind of have to be kind of like doggish
Yeah.
about what you want to accomplish. Um, and another thing that I want people to know and to understand because I realized this not too long ago, or maybe about a year ago, but a lot of times, like you see these flashy startups, these flashy, beautiful websites, and
Yeah.
everything looks so together, and you're like, wow, if I could get there one day, and I realized this maybe a year or two ago because when I started multiple businesses and people would call and they would think I was this big corporation, not 54 Thrones, a different business. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's just me. So one thing people need to realize is that you see these websites, you see these, social media pages or whatever else. And a lot of times it's just one person behind all of that who didn't give up.
Yeah.
I stumbled across, I can't even remember, it was some business, some site, something I needed, some type of SaaS product that I needed to purchase. And I did some research. I saw who the founder was and read about him. And one day, like at midnight, I was on the chat and someone was responding me and they said their name. And I'm like, you're the founder?
Wait a second.
And he was like,
I know
yeah.
who you are.
Yeah. And so it was him. He was up at midnight responding to chatbot people on his website. And so you think that everybody has it all together, but they're not. A lot of times it's just one or two people who didn't give up and who are getting zero sleep because they're obsessed with their dream and making it work. And so don't get intimidated when you see these brands and you think it's some big team of people behind. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's someone who's extremely resilient, who's doggish, and who's married to making it happen. And most of the times it starts out that way.
Yeah. I would argue every time it starts out that way.
I mean, there's most of the time, because, you do have these people who don't even have a product, but they've raised several millions of VC money and they have this team and, that. But a lot of times the people who are on the ground, who are the gritty people, the people, they're the ones who it's them and their laptop. They're the ones that are not able to, they're missing parties, they're missing weddings because it's them and their laptop. And that was me. And so that's my story behind resiliency. People, even with 54 Thrones, people are like, oh, your team. And I'm like, I am the team. It's me. I do social media. I'm doing all of this up until recently, but it was just me because it had that appearance and because I was just doggish and I wasn't going to stop.
Yeah. I love that so much. Thank you, Christina, so much. This conversation has been so inspiring, so much fun, so many laughs, and also so much really, really good insight that I think we can all take away. So many important lessons to learn about the retail space, the beauty space, the, Black Lives Matters protests, everything going on in our country and in the countries around the world. I'm so thankful for you and everything that you're doing and for coming and spending that time with us.
Thank you. I love talking with you. You are one of the best interviewers. You're so authentic and genuine. I love it. We can talk all night.
We can talk all night.